Good afternoon. I'm Kevin Walker, Senior Vice President of Public Policy for the Overland Park Chamber. This interview is being conducted on behalf of the Johnson County Public Policy Council, which is comprised of the Chambers of Commerce in Johnson County and the Greater Kansas City Chamber. Jointly, we host a site, votejoco.com, which is a nonpartisan site where voters can learn more about the candidates for public office. Today, I'm with Lindsay Vaughn, who's a candidate for the Kansas House District 22, which covers the city of Overland Park. And Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Kevin. I'm excited to be here.
Well, why don't we start by having you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for the Kansas House?
Sure, definitely. Yeah, so like Kevin said, my name is Lindsay Vaughn. I'm running for District 22. That's all in Overland Park, and it runs from 75th to 95th Street and from Metcalf to 69 Highway, which does include the downtown Santa Fe area, which is really important for our small businesses here in Overland Park. And I'm actually an Overland Park native, so born and raised here, grew up just a little bit further south, and I'm a proud product of our public schools, having graduated from the Blue Valley District. And education is really important to me. I currently work at Literacy KC, where I run their volunteer program, and that is an adult basic education nonprofit teaching adult literacy in the Kansas City Metro. So education is a big issue for me. And I'm also passionate about civic engagement, particularly getting young people involved with state and local government. So I've done a lot of work with the Johnson County Young Democrats in particular, and through my community involvement and activism, have seen the true importance and impact of local and state government. And it's because of that importance and impact that I decided to put my name on the ballot. And I'm also running because I feel like there aren't enough young people with a voice at the table. So running to hopefully make a difference in our state legislature and to be a voice for our future and part of the new generation of Kansas leadership. So
fantastic. Thank you for doing that. And why don't we dive in with our questions?
Sure.
Tell me what you see as the top 2 or 3 business issues facing the state of Kansas in the coming year.
Yeah, so of course we'll want to get our economy back on track after COVID-19. So definitely advocating for federal relief in terms of SBA loans and paycheck protection loans and things like that. But balancing our revenue in a way that supports our businesses so that we can get our economy back on track. And I think a big part of that will be Medicaid expansion, which is a top priority for me as well. Medicaid expansion will ensure another 150,000 Kansans gain access to critical healthcare services while also injecting needed federal funds into our state economy, which will help us through this period as well. So I think supporting businesses through COVID and making sure that we expand Medicaid are 2 of my top priorities.
Fantastic, thank you. Next question's around the budget, and how would you propose we balance the budget next year? And are there specific cuts or specific revenue enhancements that you would consider?
Certainly, yeah. I think Laura Kelly has done a really excellent job, Governor Kelly, of balancing our budget to date. And I really support a lot of the decisions that she's made. I think, in my perspective, we really need to focus on revenue enhancements. I think following the post-Brownback tax experiment, which failed, we've done things to, balance our tax policy, but it's not quite where it was prior to that. So I think looking at ways to have a more equitable tax policy, and then also, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. I'm sorry. What was the question again?
It's how would you propose balancing the budget, and are there specific cuts and enhancements you might look for?
Yes, thank you. Sorry. So I think looking at balancing our tax policy, and then also looking at revenue enhancements are really important. And I think there are things that already have been discussed in the state legislature that can help us do that. So for example, we could tax online purchases, the sales tax of those purchases the same as in-store purchases, which would also help support our brick and mortar stores and small businesses. So that's an option, as well as taxing streaming services the same as cable services. So looking at ways at taxing those equitably. And then, things like sports wagering have been discussed in the Kansas legislature, and taxing and regulating sports wagering as well as marijuana even, would be really important sources of revenue for our state. There was a medical cannabis bill this last legislative session, and it died in the short special session, I'm sorry. But as an agricultural state in particular, I think the production and job creation around those two things would be really beneficial for revenue enhancements as well. So I think those are really, really great opportunities to enhance revenues while also being smart about how we balance the budget in our tax policy.
Thank you. And you've mentioned the workforce a couple of times. So can you talk about what you would do to help grow and develop our state's workforce? Yeah.
I think a couple things. So I think there's a lot more we could be doing for workforce development and job training. As an employee of Literacy KC, we do a lot and are really growing into the world of workforce development. And those additional educational opportunities are huge for preparing people for the workforce, for vocational training, and for jobs that we have a lot of needs for right now, including nursing, construction, lots of those types of jobs that we could be offering additional training for to prepare people. So I think investing in workforce development and job training is a big one. I think we could also, we have a big opportunity in Kansas to expand our renewable potential. We're currently the #2 producer of wind energy in the United States. And by further investing in renewables, I think we can create jobs. We can really help, create a climate resilient business community, which is attractive for a lot of startups and highly skilled industries right now. So I think promoting renewables. And then lastly, I would say, I think businesses appreciate operating in a welcoming state. And for us, I think the next step to really promote that is to add gender identity and sexual orientation to our non-discrimination laws. We just saw that at the federal level where they upheld job protections for both of those categories. And I would love to codify that in Kansas law and extend it to things like services, public accommodations, housings, and the like, to really make sure that people feel welcome operating businesses here in Kansas.
You've touched on this a little bit with the question you just answered, but I want to go a little further just in terms of economic development policies. Are there certain policies you would support that you believe would spur job growth and help expand business in Kansas?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm sorry, you said specific to workforce development?
In economic development.
Economic development. I think really fostering the community is a huge part of that. Fostering a welcoming business community. And then, I'm trying to think. Education is a big part of it, as I said. So job training, workforce development, but then also really investing in K-12 and higher ed. So preparing our students to be a part of the workforce and to have high skilled jobs, I think is important for economic development. And then, supporting the industries that we have, like agriculture, and making sure that we have agricultural friendly policy. We have a really wonderful tech, up and coming tech community here in the Kansas City metro area and in Johnson County. So finding ways to support them, as well as small businesses, to really help those industries prosper in Kansas, I think is important too.
Good. Well, thank you for that. Let's talk a little bit about education and what are your views on our K-12 system in the state of Kansas?
Yeah, so we have excellent schools. As a proud product of our public schools, I know firsthand how important our high quality public education system is. And, I really want to continue supporting it and fully funding our K-12 schools. During, of course, the Field Brownback tax experiment, we saw a lot of those funds diverted, and we're still seeing the consequences of a lot of those, that history of underfunding. And so I want to make sure that we continue to fund K-12 and support our students so that they have the chance for success, and so that we're creating a skilled workforce for our employers, and really supporting K-12. So I think there's more we could be doing as well. Due process, there's been a movement for that in the Kansas legislature. Also fully funding special education. That wasn't resolved in the last education budget bill. So looking at things like that too, in ways that we can further support K-12.
Okay. And then jumping over to healthcare policy, just talk a little bit about your thoughts around healthcare policy in general and specifically Medicaid expansion. I know you've touched on that a little bit already, but let's dig in a little deeper.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely think it's important to expand access to affordable healthcare. And we saw with the Medicaid expansion compromise bill, some good compromises around that, really, especially with Medicaid expansion specifically. So I'm trying to think, a big part of the compromise was the reinsurance program, which with the concept of reducing the cost of premiums for private businesses, as well as increasing access through Medicaid expansion to another 150,000 Kansans. So I think looking at ways that we can do both is important to take advantage of that. So really anything we can do to increase access to affordable healthcare is critical. Medicaid expansion is certainly the next step, especially now with everything going on with COVID. It's really important that we take action on that this next legislative session, which I also mentioned is important because we'll get a federal match, which will significantly help our economy, I believe.
And then, my last question for you is not so much policy-based, but maybe tell us a little bit about what you think distinguishes you most from your opponents in the race.
Yeah, so I have really been very involved in our community. I mentioned my involvement with the Young Democrats, and I've also been a precinct committee person. My prior job actually was as a field organizer on Congresswoman Sharice Davids' campaign. So really finding ways to connect with voters in the community, find out about the issues that are important to them, connecting with advocacy groups and local leaders. And it's through that work that I've, made my decision to run for office. And I think it's really critical that I've been involved and I have those connections, and I think that sets me apart. And then I also think what sets me apart is that I'm a young person and a young woman running for office, and we don't have very many of those in Topeka with a voice at the table, and I think I'm uniquely positioned to change that. So that's another reason that I think I'm what sets me apart from my opponent.
Good. And before we wrap up, I want to give you a chance to make any closing comments and anything you want to get across to the voters.
Sure. Yeah, that was actually going to be kind of my closing thought, was just how I felt that I was set apart. So just to reiterate that, I've really enjoyed the past couple of years getting to know the issues that are important to people in our community. And another thing that's really important to me is transparency and voter outreach. So I guess I'd just say, for anyone who has questions about my policies or anything that I'm in support of, I encourage you to reach out to me. We do have a website. It's Lindsay, Lindsay, for kansashouse.com. And there's a contact form to email us. I'm also on Facebook. And communication and transparency is going to be really important to me, just to make sure that I have my ear to the voters and that I'm taking all perspectives into account. So I really encourage folks to reach out to me if they're interested.
Great. Well, Lindsay, I want to thank you so much for spending a little time with us today. I know you're busy out on the campaign trail right now, and I want to remind everybody that advanced voting currently is going on both with your mail-in ballots and advanced voting in person. And of course, the primary election is on Tuesday, August 4th, and the polls will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. So we encourage everyone to get out and vote.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, everyone.